Everyone, welcome back to Real Talk with Sadie. I'm Sadie Ingen, and you can listen to this on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and follow my Instagram at Sadie in LA 96. But if you just want to listen to this online, it's Real Talk with Sadie. So today I have an absolute incredible special guest, and she is vital. Vital to the film and entertainment industry. I don't think these films could actually be possible without her. And one of her most recent works has been on the hit HBO series, The Last of Us. But you've also done work for a Netflix series called The Babysitter Club, and you've been awarded a Daytime Emmy. So congrats. So know her name, Cynthia Summers. And welcome so much to the podcast. And I'm just beyond ecstatic to get to know you, your passions in life, what makes you fulfilled, and what you're currently working on. Cynthia, welcome. How about you just quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, Sadie. Nice to be here. Thanks for reaching out to me. I love talking about all things costume. So I'm really happy to be here. So yeah, I'm Cynthia Summers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where are you from? Are you in California? Are you in a different country?
Yeah. I'm actually in a different country, I guess, although it sometimes doesn't seem that way. I'm in Vancouver, Canada. And
Beautiful.
I spend my time between Vancouver and Los Angeles mostly.
Okay. Next time
Yeah.
you're in Los Angeles, please let me know. I love it. That'd be really fun.
Sure,
And I wanted to do a quick icebreaker question.
sure.
Instead of costume designing, are you an actor too? Have you ever tried acting?
No, I'm not an actor, but way back at the beginning of my professional life as an adult, I was a dancer and in musical theater. So that was my yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
that's
So never on
amazing.
camera, only theater. So
Only theater.
yeah.
So that's a great segue into this question. So I was thinking, what really got you inspired for costume design? Was it musical? Because that does take a lot of costume design work, right? Did that inspire
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, um, theater and dance, I think are pretty underfunded. So I think
Ah,
if you have any skills, whether regardless of what it's for, if it's for
mm,
making sets or making costumes, I think they're really put well to use.
mhm,
If you're a performer in a company, for instance. So
mhm.
that's kind of where I really started off. That's where I got the bug, I guess. That's
But
where I
I
got
like
the
that
bug.
too.
Yeah, for
Okay.
costume designing. And I have to admit that when I started out, I didn't actually really know what a costume designer did. I think it's like all of us, at the beginning, you don't really know I mean, unless you're going to school and you learn, then you know. But I kind of did it backwards and I kind of got into it first and then went back to school later. So a lot of my experience is actually practical.
Oh my gosh, that's
So,
really, really interesting too. And I'm
yeah.
super, super naive to this industry because when I think of costume design, I also think of fashion. And people
Yeah.
go to school for fashion school. Is that completely different from costume design school, or do they go hand in hand?
I wouldn't say it's completely different, but it is
Mm,
different because, when you're creating for a production, there's a lot, uh, the criteria that you're creating for is different than if you're, say, creating for a fashion show
okay,
or creating for print or
right.
creating for other genres, if you will.
Okay.
But at the nucleus of it all, it's really about creating a look for a character. And I do believe that even in fashion design, you know you if you're doing a collection for a season, you're a runway collection, I mean, look at the big designers, you've got a
Oh,
story. If you're at all the couture houses, usually a story. So there's similarities in that, and also you're designing for people at the end of the day.
mhm.
So you need a costume to tell a story or a garment to tell a story.
Yeah.
um, and it's also got to fit the body. It's got to fit a human body. So you really need to know the technicalities of how to put things together to get them look a certain way on all kinds of bodies, skin tones, heights. Oh, sorry about that. Genders, non-gender. I mean, there's a lot that goes into thinking about costume and what it's going to say.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So,
very great
yeah,
insight. Thank you, Cynthia. So you
yeah,
said you got the bug during musical theater, is that correct?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, because one of my questions was, was there a specific movie or film or maybe play that actually inspired you? Like, that's what I want to do. Do you have a
Oh,
specific
yeah.
one?
Yeah, there's a specific one, and it's very old, and it
Oh,
was a long time ago, and it was called Dr. Zhivago, and it was the book Dr. Zhivago with Julie Christie and Omar Sharif, and just I think I saw it when I was very young, like maybe I was 6 years old. I think my mom snuck me into the theater and she shouldn't have, or it was probably, PG rated at some stage. So, um, but it just captivated me. The scenery, the vista, because if you know the book, it's set in Russia and some of it's in the winter, and that's really stuck with me. Which is interesting when I think of The Last of Us, because a lot of that we shot in the winter, in the dead of winter.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was beautiful. The costumes were beautiful. Um, it was period.
Mhm.
So it told a story of a time that I didn't know or wasn't aware of, but it sparked my interest. So that was the first movie ever. Another movie that was really integral to sort of spurring me on even after I got into costume designing was Frida, the
Yeah.
movie Frida. Just the whole production was, I mean, who doesn't love Frida Kahlo for one,
Oh, yeah.
and is an inspiration to most women at some
Beautiful.
point, in their lives in different kinds of ways, I think.
Yeah.
But the whole movie was just so beautiful and so vibrant, and the cast was amazing. I mean, everything about it. So I think there's movies that might start you out if it's movies,
Mhm.
or if it's plays or ballets, that start you out, maybe and spur you on. But there's definitely more along the journey that kind of reinvigorate you, I think, and give you new ideas and new inspiration to carry on with what you're doing or go in a different direction or not do it anymore or
Mhm.
whatever.
Oh man, that is
Yeah.
awesome. That
Yeah.
makes me think. So, are you inspired by like the Hollywood kind of more modern day? Or are you actually more inspired by the old time cinema? Or can it
I
be a
mean,
mixture?
it can be a mixture. And,
Mhm.
there are people who in the design world, whether it's production design or costume design or directors of photography or directors, who more or less stay to a certain genre or a certain time period. They thrive in it. And that's great. I haven't found that yet. I haven't found a period or a time, place, or a genre that really is the only thing I want to do. And
Right.
instead, I feel like, a lot of times people will say, oh, so you and this, and you do this and that, but it's really hard for someone to say, and this is what you do. So it's hard for me to have this conversation sometime with people because I love it all to some degree. The only thing that really I don't is hard for me is like hardcore horror.
Okay.
It's hard for me to get into hardcore horror. I can do,
That's okay.
psychological horror is a different thing, but
Yes, it is.
yeah,
But
the kind of like,
no, but it seems great, really well-rounded, and you can tell a story, and every kind of genre of film has such different pieces, I bet, that you want to put together. So that
yeah,
is absolutely incredible.
yeah, it keeps it fresh, it's
Mhm.
there's there's I'm longing for. I really appreciate right now Emily in Paris because
Oh,
I kind of
yeah.
miss that. I miss the L Word days. I miss, the fashion, a
Yeah.
show that's about actual fashion, not just contemporary, but fashion. I haven't done that for a while. Actually, not well, Babysitters was a different generation, but also Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce was very fashion forward in a
Yeah.
different demographic, but really fun. And I kind of miss that.
Okay.
Um, yeah. And also the Lemony Snicket of it all.
Wow, such a classic too. And I was
Yeah.
thinking there's so many books that, get adapted into films. So
Yeah.
are you to like get prepared for a role? Are you reading the books beforehand? How do you get inspired?
Sometimes, because I mean, Lemony Snicket is a good, for instance. Actually, and so is The Last of Us. If you're thinking game, like something else that is already living, whether it's a game or whether it's a book or a script that's being reworked. Sometimes it's good, but also sometimes it's detrimental. If you're not going to be shooting it by the book, as it were,
Yeah.
then it's a little detrimental. It's good to know who the characters are, unless they are also changing somewhat. So it's good in some cases and good not to. I can give a for instance also right now. I was taking an interview for a show, and it's based on a real life character. So I really dove deep into it, and I was trying to like put the real character story to the script that I was given to read, and it wasn't really meshing, and I was a little confused. But you don't get a lot of information ahead of time. There you just get like a log line, and here's the date for your meeting, and put a presentation together. And so I was having a lot of trouble. It wasn't really meshing, so I spent days and days and days learning about this person who lived. And of course, when I got to the meeting, I'm like, well, here's my presentation. And, I couldn't find this and I couldn't find that, but this is what I think we're implying and blah, 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 blah. And of course, the people I was speaking to said, oh my gosh, no, yes, forget about everything you knew about that guy. We are just, we're just doing something inspired by, and we're in a different place, in a different time, and everything else. So that's a good case in point of, I guess,
It can totally switch on you, and you do your due diligence. I can tell already. Oh yeah, that's very good.
Oh yeah, you have to. Yeah.
Who is your biggest inspiration for costume design? Is there someone in particular?
Wow. I mean, wow. I don't know. I just take it from everywhere. It's really hard for me to pinpoint it, and it's really hard for me to pinpoint. I take it from all around, from movies I've seen, from designers, if it's pertinent, to just the world and nature. Like sometimes nature has a lot to show us, and nature actually played a big role in designing The Last of Us, because it was all about deconstructed nature. Because we're living, in an after an apocalyptic moment has happened. So, and people aren't actually living out in nature because they're hiding a lot. So nature really, and colors in nature really played a lot into, the design and the inspiration for The Last of Us. But I think it's also, it's important, going back to books. I think it's important, if there are book references, to sort of see what was done before, and that can be your inspiration. That can be your design inspiration.
And it doesn't have to be a copy and paste, but inspiration.
Yeah,
I like that. And you
see
can
how it's good to see how, for instance, Babysitters Club was done in, oh my gosh, I had two iterations before I did it. So it was good to go back and see how, current day style, current day designers, current day film books were applied to those previous renditions, and then sort of what we were going to do with the more current one, but how to sort of hang on to some bits of the past, just to keep it married, just to keep it,
And you also, that makes sense. And then you also worked on Swan Song, right? Which started, what is it? How do you pronounce Mahershala? Mahershala Ali, right?
Yeah.
And I was looking at the trailer. I haven't seen it yet. I should. It's on Apple TV. It's more, is it modern day, kind of like streetwear?
You know what it is? It's actually set in the future, and that's a good point, because there's a difference between something set in the future and something futuristic. And a lot of times, producers will come in and they'll say it's futuristic, and I'll be like, okay, but it's a jeans and t-shirt show, basically. So how futuristic is that, and what is futuristic about it? And what was futuristic about Swan Song was the technology. So I forget when it was set. but
Oh,
it's maybe
I can look it up too.
2030 or something like that,
Mhm.
or so a little bit into the future from where we are now, but
Mhm.
not futuristic. And um,
Right.
the director really wanted the characters to look grounded and accessible, as
Okay.
we did with The Last of Us. So
Mhm.
we really kind of stayed in the now, or what about costume is timeless? What about costume translates, over a few decades, like denim
Yeah.
does, jeans do. There's been
Yeah.
jeans around for decades. So
Levi's for sure.
Levi's, yeah. So those kind of
Mhm.
things we kind of kept. And then when we got into, I don't want to spoil it if no one has seen it, but when we got into the lab scenes, that's where we kind of went a bit futuristic with it,
Uh-huh.
um, in the costume and the sets, I would say. So kind of that gave you the sense of, oh, something's a little off. We're actually, where are we? Where, you want to ask those questions of time and
Mhm.
place. And
Right.
so I think that's the lab scenes sort of let us know that we weren't um in 20, whenever we shot that, 2021, I
Yeah.
guess.
Very good. And it's interesting too. Imagine when you're working with like directors and writers, they might all have their own interpretation of what futuristic means or what
Yes.
modern day means. So do
Yeah,
you give feedback to them too and kind of give your own opinions on what it is?
totally. Yeah. So the script comes first,
Mm-hmm.
which is why there's a writer's strike right now. Very
Mm-hmm.
important that we get through that. And the writers are, anyways, I won't get on my
No,
platform about
I've been
that,
looking
but
on Instagram. I'm proud of
yeah,
everyone who's posting and speaking.
yeah.
I did want to go to LA and walk with them. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, as you know, even just doing podcasts, if there's not a script, if there's not a direction, if there's not sort of a
Mhm.
basic nucleus of what the story or what we're going to talk about is going to
Yeah.
be, you don't have a story. So
Okay.
it all starts there with the writer. So we get a script. I read the script. I get notes from the director or producers,
Mhm.
depending on if it's series or if it's a movie.
Yeah.
Um, and then we kind of come back and talk about it initially. Before I even get a show, we do like mood boards and we have a meeting and I pitch
Oh,
ideas.
cool. And you
It's like an
pitch.
audition. It's like an
That
audition.
was one of my questions too. What is that process? Is the audition process of sketches? Like, are you artistic? Do you draw your own like kind of setup for the designs?
Yeah, I can draw. I haven't
Mm-hmm.
for a long time because
Okay.
projects I've been on in the last 10 years have been big. So there's no
Yeah.
time. So I can do doodles and I
Mhm.
I I could illustrate. I just have gotten so far away from it. But I rely on an artist to do my work for me,
That's
which is
fantastic.
great. And that's another, illustrators are really important
Okay.
in
That's
our
so
world.
that's a collaborative effort. I'm so bad at art. So you have to work with the artist and telling them what that vision is, and then they will draw
Yes.
it, and
So
then you say that's it, or kind of
yeah.
like there.
What happens with
Oh,
that is I'll create a mood board.
mhm.
Um, and so I'll do tears, I'll do clips from other movies or anything. I'll send them pictures of nature. I'll pick art, anything that sort of inspires the character. And then I will send that to them. We actually do a lot of it virtually these days. Um,
Oh,
there's a lot of virtual hangover from COVID.
oh, yes, there is. Even this.
Right? So many meetings are over Zoom. And I
Mhm.
think that costume illustration is something that's being able to hang on to that, which is great because that allows me to work with someone in Los Angeles or New York or
Great.
Toronto or London or anywhere.
Mhm.
And so generally, I will send all the information, the inspiration I have for the character.
Mhm.
Um, we may or may not have an actor at that point. Um, and then we'll sort of get on a Zoom and we'll kind of go through the mood board. We'll talk about colors and tones. Um,
Yeah.
the illustrator often will put a character into a background, and that will often be sort of dictated by where this character shows up in the show, in the movie. So
Mhm.
that's really helpful for directors and producers to sort of see, I'm going with this colorway and this sort of
Right.
tone and these undertones because we're going to see them in the forest, or we're going to see them in I don't know, a concrete building.
Mhm.
And then they're going to interact with all these other characters. So
Wow.
this is how and why I see this character. And so then after the illustrator is done, they'll send me an illustration. We might tweak it a bit. It might be perfect. It might be scrapped completely because I will have in the meantime gotten notes and we're going in a different direction, and that can happen a lot. And then I pass that information on with my mood boards and the illustration to the director, producers, and then we have a conversation about it.
Wow.
And as I said, some things are scrapped completely because the story goes in a different direction or they don't like it.
It's true. Do you
Yeah.
ever have to scramble last minute to get
A lot of, in
communication
this industry, we
materials?
call it pivoting. And
I
it's
like that word. That's a good word for it.
yeah.
Optimistic in a way.
Yeah, because you have to stay on the ride. You can't get off. You have to stay with it. So until the costume's actually in front of the camera, that's when you can go, okay, great. That's done. Moving on.
I get anxiety. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I don't know how you do it.
Totally. But up until that moment, you know, you're hoping that this is what everyone is going to see.
Exactly.
And why. And then there are times also where I have a good idea, or I think I have a good idea. I'm passionate about it. I'm promoting it. I'm staying with it until I can't, if it's not working. And there could be a lot of reasons why it doesn't work for someone else, and I have to honor that. And you know, I have to sort of get out of my way of why I think it's right. And even if I have more information on why I've created something a certain way, the director or producer may, or the cast member may have also more information that I don't have about why it doesn't work or why it does work. So, and unfortunately, you know, the information doesn't always continuously flow because things change on the fly so often. So
you do have to be a little vulnerable. And that's into my next question. What are some of the challenges when facing costume designing? I guess it's a part of it, but are there any actual challenges that you struggle sometimes, and can you reflect on that?
I mean, they're struggles, but they're to be expected, I guess. You know, if you're on a show with a producer or a director that isn't accepting what you keep putting forward, even though you've done your, you know, your presentation at the beginning, you had the conversation, you get hired, there's always the possibility that as you get to know your producer, director, your actors, that for some reason you aren't seeing eye to eye creatively, and that can happen. It's a drag, but it can happen. And that's a point where everybody has to rejig and make a decision, you know, whether we're going to be able to follow this through, whether we're going to be able to pivot enough, or if it's just not going to work. And that's the hard part. Fortunately, I think for most of us, that doesn't happen that often. And that's because, you know, you have to really pitch yourself when you have your first interview. And a lot of times there will be successive interviews after that. If they want you to create a bit more about what we've been talking about, you know, if you have the conversation goes in a certain direction and they haven't really seen it in the presentation, they'll ask you to go back and rejig it, add some more, and then send more in, and then they'll have more conversations. So there's a lot of that before you actually get hired. So the probability of not jiving with someone after you've done all that and after you've been hired is kind of slim. Yeah, but it does happen.
But thank you for being open about that and being vulnerable. I think it's good for people to know, because this podcast, I want people who are up and coming costume designers to kind of know the behind the scenes of what it takes and what can you expect. But for you personally, you seem very optimistic and such an empath and very sympathetic. So I think people absolutely love you when you work on projects.
I think that's the thing too. That's a good point. You have to be optimistic. You have to be willing to move. You know, you have to be willing to, you have to be able to hear what other people are saying. Sometimes that's hard because as creatives, a lot of people aren't good at vocalizing what they're, or even envisioning what they want. Sometimes they just know what they want, but they don't know exactly what that is. So you've got to be able to come with options and with different variations on the theme. But they all need to be pertinent. You can't just kind of throw stuff out there. It needs to be variations on the theme. So you really need to be able to think outside the box sometimes as well, and just sort of and that's a great thing, because that's where, you know, monumental film is made, when people, the creatives from in front or behind the camera, have an idea and have the guts to say, hey, what about this? Or what about this? What about this? What do you think of this? And, you know, it'll either be poo-pooed, or it might tweak something for some people. And actually, some people might not even go, not exactly that, but hey, what about this? So it's a real collaboration, and it's an ongoing collaboration. You really need to keep yourself open. As creatives, it's hard to not be offended sometimes. It's hard to not let your ego be bruised. And it may happen, but you have to learn personally, I think, how to work through that and actually have that work for you, you know, because ego as a creative, I mean, it's all about ego. Really, at the end of the day, it really is. Ego is not a bad thing. I think ego's been sort of promoted over time as like egotistical.
I agree, though.
You know, but if you don't have ego, you don't have creation. So
and it helps bring confidence in a way, in a certain way.
Totally. Yeah.
Good for you. And I bet in costume design, do you hear the word like perfectionist? You have to get the costume perfect. Would you consider yourself a perfectionist, or you kind of like ignore that word and just say best to my ability?
No, you have to be a perfectionist. Even at the end of the day, if your costume has to change, you have to, whatever you put forward has to be well thought out and well executed to perfection.
I love that.
Even when we're doing, like I do, so for creating a world, oftentimes I will create a little village of a group of people on mannequins. So if we've got, you know, X, Y, and Z character, I will try and create them on a mannequin with other characters that live in their world. Or if we're creating like a world like the Boston QZ, all the background performers, I'll create a group of people, a diverse group of people. So the director and producer can come in, and production designer even can come in and go, oh, I see what you're talking about. Oh, I see what this is. But I think that needs to be a little bit more broken down. Or I think the colors, there needs to be more color. It just gives us, I think I've gotten off track because now I've forgotten your question.
No, perfectionist. No, you're
perfection.
No, I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, they need the details to make it perfection. No, I love the ramble. This is what it's all about.
Right. No. And also it gives them an opportunity to see it actualized. And maybe it looks different than they thought it was going to look, even though that's what they've asked for. And that could be me, that could be the director, the producer, the creator, that could be the production designer. And then everyone can stand in front of the village and say, you know, oh, that's great. And I know we asked for that tone of blue, but now that I see it, it's not going to show up in the set. It's going to fade away in the set. There's too much blue in the world to begin with. So maybe we need to make that, turn it into a gray. Let's go into the gray world with that. And, you know, it gives you those opportunities for everyone to express, for the big collaboration that is film, where you really need to be working with all the other departments.
I was going to ask you, it has to be a collaborative effort, right?
Yeah, it really,
feed off each other.
Yeah, it really does. A show like Lemony Snicket, for instance, in season 1, which I didn't do season 1, but season 1 was amazing. And there were some characters who had a costume that actually had the same print on their dress as they had on the wallpaper, for instance, which is kind of cool. I always love that. And, you know, so obviously, clearly what the set decorator or the production designer was creating for the wall in that set needed to be needed to work into the costume. So it was, and then sometimes it's the other way around. It's, you know, let me see, there was a costume for Esme Squalor, and the pink, the like bright sort of fuchsia pink suit with the super exaggerated shoulders. It was a real vivid color. And then Carmelita wound up wearing a junior version of that. So we really needed to make sure that they never walked into a set that had that color in it in a big way. Like, you know, there couldn't be, they couldn't go in and sit on a bright pink fuchsia sofa, for instance, or even something in the same colorway, because they just blend in, unless that was a gag that we were going to do. But
wow, it's really technical, Cynthia. It just blows my mind. And I was thinking too, when you watch certain films, there's different lightings too. Maybe you have like an 80s film and it's like a little bit more blurry, or you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes, totally. Or someone goes into a memory and the memory becomes kind of Kodachrome looking. It's it's
did they
kind of
tell you that ahead of time, or what if they film it and then they're like, you know what, we need to change the color of the film?
No, definitely. The DP and the costume designer and the production designer, everyone, but at least those three departments heads definitely have to get together at the beginning of a project. And you know, the question is, for me, the first question is, well, so when you look at white, this isn't white, but when you look at white in film, it's very rarely true white, because it reacts differently with different lenses, with different lighting, with different film. And with HD and HDMI, it's all the colors kind of changed when we went from actual film to HDMI. It was really tough on everyone, including.
That was a huge shift. I remember when HDMI or HD TVs were coming out.
Yes.
And then there's plasma before that.
Yes, I know. It changed the whole, like, people were stretched, and I mean the whole thing was really hard. It was really hard on the makeup department, because when HD came around, this little bump I see on my face right here looked like this. You know? So because with the camera, the HD is so sensitive and it picks up every angle and every, you know, this sort of fuzziness of my hair right now would be like
the details.
It picks up the details much more accurately, I guess. So everybody had to shift. Everybody had to move in how they sort of applied things, but it also changed color, the way we dealt with color. So for instance, before, like, black became a very hard color to work with, because if you had a flat black t-shirt on someone, just a regular t-shirt, and usually they're cotton, so they don't have a lot of luster. They're just kind of a damp, or sort of a matte color. HD just kind of makes a black hole out of that. There's nothing for the camera to sort of bounce off of. So, and I'm not an operator, so I don't have all the correct terminology.
Fantastic.
But it kind of like just your actor could be walking around a black t-shirt and the body might look like a black hole. Because there's no definition. So you definitely have definition for the camera to pick up. So then, therefore, now you need to think about black t-shirts that look like black t-shirts, but have sheen or luster to them. So,
textures.
Textures for the camera to pick up. Red became a bad thing. I mean, just different colors. And then with getting back to my again ramble, but getting back to sort of my basic.
Cynthia, this is beyond awesome. No one knows about this, and you're so knowledgeable.
I think if you go to film school, you learn about these things.
Is this where you learned a lot of this, film school?
No, because
you did backwards.
I did backwards. I started in theater, and a film came to town. Maybe you've heard the story, as I seem to tell a lot these days. A film came to town, and I was in fashion design school at that time, and a film came to town and was looking for someone to build these specific tutus, which is what I did when I was a dancer before. I did dance costumes. So I volunteered for the job, and I'm pretty sure it was a volunteer job. I'm pretty sure I didn't get paid for it, but I volunteered for the job, and that's where I first was on a set. At a circus or a base camp, where I saw all the trailers, where I saw everybody, and the
real moment,
dark blacked out vans with people getting out of them. It was all magic. But that's what led me into, and then after that, it was a lot of practical learning on the job. I mean, one of my first actual film I did, I couldn't read a call sheet. So if you don't know, a call sheet is the paper we get every day. It has all the information on it that
Mhm.
anybody in any department needs to know to get through the day.
Uh,
Um,
itinerary, basically? Is it
was
itinerary?
that?
And is it like an itinerary?
It's an
Would you say?
itinerary, so it's called a
Mm,
call sheet. You get it the night before, so you have to be looking for it at wrap
okay,
the night before.
sure.
Um, it's got basically all, it's kind of broken out. So it's got all the scenes you're going to be shooting the next day,
Mm-hmm.
every cast member who's in it, what they're shooting, because a lot of the times we don't shoot an entire scene at once. It'll be a part of a scene. It's got everybody who'll be in it, all the background performers that'll be in it. It's got it's got the an advance for the next day, so you can have an idea what we're supposed to be doing for the next day. But a call sheet always changes. That's what everybody
Oh
should know.
man.
As one AD who is an assistant to the director who does the call sheet.
Wow.
AD said to me once, call sheet is just a suggestion.
Just because it always changes. So when you first saw that call
Oh
sheet,
yeah.
I bet that was overwhelming for you if it's your first time working on a big
It
set.
is. And
I
there's all
understand
these
that.
acronyms. There's all these acronyms like, start work, which is SW, that makes sense. Start work finish, which
Mhm.
is SWF. OC, they're on call.
Wow. Is there an acronym for you? Costume design, CD? Or did I
Yeah.
just made that up?
Well, yeah, it is CD. For my assistant costume designer, it's ACD.
ACDC. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah, yeah. And for instance, for a costume designer, because we are often always prepping while we're shooting at the same time, so we can't have a call time to be on set. So we are often OC, which is on call.
Okay, that makes it such an
Because
insightful
we're
thing.
everywhere. We're everywhere. We're in prep. We're back at the studio.
Uh-huh.
We're back at our production office. We're in meetings. We're in Zoom meetings. We're on set establishing cast. We're
Sure.
on set because we're on a distant location and we can hang out.
Yeah.
What is really interesting and a little sad to me these days is because production has become quite technical and large. And I was talking to another friend of mine, a costume designer friend of mine,
Mhm.
and especially when you're doing series, it's really tough to get to set. There's so much happening offset for us,
Yeah.
and set is usually not where we are. It's really hard to get to set, and I really kind of miss that.
Oh,
Like
I bet you
being able to
do.
just hang out on set all day is like
Mhm.
not a
And
thing.
more casual. It's just become so big. That's
Yeah,
interesting that
yeah.
perspective on that.
Technology has helped us a lot, but it's also, well, in every walk of life,
Everyone.
right? Technology has made
Yeah.
us so you're
Chat
all
GPT. I don't
gettable.
know if you're familiar
Yeah,
with that now.
yeah, yeah. You're
All
always
of that.
gettable. You're
I
always
know.
gettable.
It's
So,
true. But speaking of sets, want to dive into The Last of Us? I have so many questions about that.
yes.
Um, how did you get casted? Because remember you're talking about mood boards, like
Yeah,
the auditions. How
yeah,
did someone mention the role? Yeah, what your first initial word of it? How did that
yeah.
happen?
So, I have a producer friend who
Mhm.
I have worked with since my very first film. So this is really important for
That's
people.
fantastic.
Yeah, and I've been doing this almost 30 years now. And I met Rose Lamb, who is an amazing producer, on my very first film, called Double Happiness. And she, I don't know how she got involved with the project, but she suggested me to Craig Mazin, who is the creator of
Yeah,
the show.
he's confirmed.
And
He's really great.
yeah, and as a good designer who could work in Calgary, maybe if I traveled. And they met with several. So that's the key thing to know is they will meet with several people.
Mhm.
Networks and studios want to see probably as well at least three, but as many as they can get. There's a lot of producers and directors who work with the same people a lot, and they
Mhm.
will try and promote those people, or that it'll just be a requirement of their hire.
Ah,
But in any case, Rose put me forward, and so I put a mood board together, and we had a Zoom meeting with, I don't know, 8 people. So I gave my pitch to the 8 people, and it went well.
fantastic,
Yeah,
fantastic. And
it
I
went
bet you're
well.
ecstatic. So did you
Yeah.
know about the game beforehand?
Um, I did not know about the game,
Yeah, I
which
barely knew. My husband
it's
does.
yeah, yes, right. It's
Mm,
interesting. There's
so
I mean, I knew
interesting.
of the game. but I've not played the game.
Uh-huh.
Didn't know the exact sort of story of the game and
Right.
the point of the game, the premise of the
Uh-huh.
game. Whereas Craig Mason's a gamer. And
Oh, very much so.
yeah,
Yeah,
he's
and real, of course.
yes,
Mhm. So
yeah.
when you heard about the role and you're like, okay, I'm gonna set my mood board up, does that mean you have to um look at the game and then say, oh, okay, let me get some inspiration from that? Or did you just read
Yeah.
the script and you're like, okay, I can adapt the costume? How does that work?
Yeah. So similarly to a book, but different because there's in some ways a lot more at stake when you
Yes,
adapt a game to live
I was
action.
gonna say.
Yeah, there's an invested, a super invested community around the game. And that community, being the gamers, want to see their heroes uh they're in a live action form.
Yeah.
There's a lot of critique. There's a lot of
All the
eyes on.
judgment.
There's a lot of expectation. There's definitely going to be people who are disappointed because we all as people have, we see Joel and Ellie as animated characters, and
Mhm.
that to actualize that into to life. I mean, something very similar, but from a book and a
Mhm.
completely different genre was Outlander. And I don't know if you know it
Yes.
at all, but
Mhm.
Outlander, the series, like, so taking Jamie, the main character, these books that the fans have been reading
So
for
popular.
years and years and years and trying to find the right one actor who's going to embody everybody's idea of what Jamie Fraser looks like. So it's
Oh,
the same kind of thing, right? It's really
a lot of
tough.
pressure.
It's a it's it's hard for casting, and they've got to
You
cast far and wide, which is
oh,
they did for this show. And
you
uh
did a fantastic job, by the way. There's no judgment here at all. It was uncanny, truly.
right? Right?
And
Landry
I something
Pedro and Ellie, or sorry,
yeah.
Andella was you know I think my first response was not yes, absolutely,
Mhm.
because I'm not a gamer, so I wasn't that invested in that way.
Right.
But it was, oh, interesting. I
And it's a
see that.
challenge for you. And you said you like to work kind of, there's not one particular genre or
Mm,
so
mm.
I think it's
Yeah,
great and it expands your creativity for
it
sure.
does. And sometimes I think it's good because, I mean, if we're doing the same thing all the time,
That's
I gave someone else an example of another show came my way at the same time as Swan Song, and it was very similar to Lemony Snicket.
mm,
Very similar. There was children in the same sort of situation, and um, I just, at the end of the day, I just said no because I've done that, and it's not that I've done it and I never want to do it again. But Lemony Snicket is such a big part of my career
mm.
and my person that I just felt like I'm not sure I could do this other show justice. I still have too
Yes.
much of Lemony Snicket and those characters alive for me, living for me. And I am not sure because this other show is also um, fantasy and fantastical. And and maybe a different time,
Mhm.
maybe I would have been up to it. But at that time, I just felt like I wasn't far enough, distant enough from it to be able to do this note project justice. So I went with Swan Song, which was
Wow.
completely different.
That's an
Uh,
honest answer. That's
but
vulnerability.
kudos to designers of every department that
Mhm.
do kind of do the same time period or
Mhm.
genre all the time, because I
Sure.
don't know how you keep that fresh, you know?
That's such a good perspective. You're absolutely right, though. And I was going to ask you, like, how do you keep those ideas in mind doing research on there's trends that happen every year and you have to stay up to date with that. I feel
Yeah, you
very
do. I mean,
interesting.
that's the great thing about something that's fashion driven,
Uh-huh.
which was why the L Word and Girlfriend's Guide was so great,
Mhm.
because there you're trying to keep ahead of the trends. You're almost
Right.
trying to estimate what the designers are going to be putting out in
Mhm.
their next season, which of course is 2 seasons ahead. So,
Interesting.
you know, Sex and the City. I mean,
There's a
a
lot.
lot of these fashion driven series or movies um set trends for one,
Yeah, they
and
do.
it's trend setting, and then also get a little off trend in order to survive.
Yeah.
I think that I've done that, where you kind of create a trend within a trend, just because
Uh-huh.
you can't really know unless you have an in with the
True.
actual fashion designer. So the same is to be said for fantasy, for contemporary. You need to stay. I guess one thing that I think is thrown around a lot is you want it to be accessible. You want people to be able to feel like they can connect visually with characters.
Yeah.
You also want to be aspirational, not all the time, but a lot of the time.
True.
Productions want you to be creating characters that are aspirational. So,
Mhm.
you know, the L word kind of fell into that a lot
Yeah.
in a big way for me. It was like, you know, does every lesbian that lives here
Mhm.
and does this look like this? No. But the
Mhm.
amount of people that wanted to maybe aspire to look like that and may not look
Yeah.
exactly like that, but it kind of ups their game, their personal game a little.
No,
So
absolutely.
these are the kind of things. Babysitters Club, same thing,
Oh, for sure.
you
And I
know?
was thinking, you've worked on so many different films and there could be tons of different outfit changes. But I was thinking about like The Last of Us, and because they're
Yeah.
in a post-apocalyptic setting, there's not a lot of quick changes. So you have to get it right because you're going to see that one outfit for multiple times. Is that different from anything you've done
That's right.
before?
No, because there in series work there
Mhm.
are a lot of characters that will. Lemony Snicket's another good
Mhm.
example, or Altered Carbon even, where a lot of characters will go from one episode to the next.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there was one look, a couple looks for Joel and Ellie, I think, where they were not for the entirety of the episodes,
Mhm.
but that a look traveled over 4 episodes.